Are you looking for a scrumptious fall dessert? Maybe one that you can even bring to the Thanksgiving table that won't eat up all your bites, points, or calories. Well, if you are, I have the perfect solution for you here. This is my apple-cranberry bread pudding, warming and delicious, with a taste so decadent you'll be shocked at how few bites, points, or calories there are. So if you're ready for another fall dessert option, stick around because it's coming up next. Hello and happy Nut-Vember. Welcome to my kitchen. My name's Roy. I am a home cook and amateur baker, and I'm here on this channel sharing recipes that have helped me to lose over 125 pounds, whether those recipes are mine or someone else's. And yes, you did hear me correctly. I wished you a happy Nut-Vember, because this is a collab that was created by Jay over at The Average Jay. And he is calling it Nut-Vember because all of our dishes in this collab have to have nuts in them. I did ask early on if I was nuts enough that I didn't need to add any to the dish, and I was shut down. So I am adding some nuts to my dish, but they're not many, and you could actually leave them out if you prefer. But I am today making my apple-cranberry bread pudding. Now, bread pudding is one of my favorite things. It's so comforting, kind of like a big mass of French toast all mushed together. Now I'm craving French toast. But anyway, I am making my apple-cranberry bread pudding, which would be great as a dessert on your Thanksgiving table or even for Christmas. And you could play around with it and change up the apples and put in pears instead. Pears and cranberry go very well together. You can even change up the cranberries and use blueberries. Apple and blueberry would be interesting. So you can play around with it. I'm giving you the basics of how I do mine. And then, like I always say, play with your food. But let's go over the ingredients. I have here 8 slices of low point, low bite bread. Now I'm using the Sara Lee Delightful 45 for this. You can use any of those low bite, low point breads that you want, but it does have to be dried out. And I don't know if you can hear, this is not the soft bread it was last night, because what you need to do is the night before, and I will show you video of me doing this. You need to take your 8 slices of low bite, low point bread, and what I do, you want them in about 1-inch pieces. So I cut them each in half down the middle, then each of those halves in half. Then I do it in the same way in the opposite direction. So that gives me a bunch of little cubes. Then I put them out on a cooling rack sit over a baking sheet so any crumbs will fall into the baking sheet. You could do it directly on the table if you prefer, but there's less cleanup this way. But you do want it on something that will allow the air to get all around it, because otherwise if it's sitting directly on a plate or cutting board or what have you, that underside isn't getting any air, so it's not going to dry out. If you do need to do that, what you'll have to do is just come through and toss them every now and then just to make sure that the softer side is getting some air exposure and dry it out. These have been sitting out probably at this point like 18 hours. So they are nice and dry. Now, why do you want your bread to be dried out? That is because you want it to be able to soak up all of this custard. The egg and cream mixture that we're going to be making is a custard. You want it to soak up all of that stuff. And when it's soft, it will soak it up, but it will also start to fall apart. But if your bread is dry, like I have here, then it's going to soak up more of that liquid, but not fall apart. It's going to retain its shape, and that's what we want. Now you could also, if you were pressed for time or you didn't feel like leaving it out overnight or you forgot, You could also toast up your bread like this in the oven. I would put it on maybe like 250 on a sheet pan and put it in for, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes, see how it's going, and keep tossing it as you go so that all of the bread is getting some of that heat and drying out. I have here 3 eggs. These are at room temperature. I have here 1/2 cup of sugar replacement. I have switched from Swerve because Paul was complaining about that aftertaste that you get, that cooling after effect. So I have switched from Swerve, which I used to use, and I am now using all-purpose in the raw. And that's from the people who do sugar in the raw. They also have monk fruit in the raw and things. This is all-purpose in the raw, and we get no aftertaste from it whatsoever. So if you're looking for a new sweetener that doesn't have an aftertaste, you might want to try this one. I have here 1 cup of cranberries. These are fresh cranberries. I usually store them immediately in the freezer because I never know when I'm going to be using them. And I do have some in the freezer, but I wanted to use fresh because if you're using frozen, which you can, what I would do is let them thaw in a sieve over a bowl so that any excess moisture will drip out, because you don't want your bread pudding to get too soggy. So definitely thaw out your cranberries if they are frozen, but you can still use them that way. I have here my handy dandy cooking spray, of course, and here I have 1.5 cups of almond milk, and you could obviously use whatever milk that you prefer, but I'm keeping the bites and points down, so that's what I'm using. And I have here 1/2 cup of fat-free half and half. The one that I'm using is one of the store brands, and for a 1/4 cup, it's only 1 bite or Blue Point. I have here 2 medium apples, and I'm going to be peeling and dicing those up. I have here 1 teaspoon of lemon juice. That's just to toss the apples in so that they don't brown before I get to throw them into the bread pudding. I have here 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and here I have 1.5 teaspoons of apple pie spice. Now, if you don't have apple pie spice, which I did do a tutorial last holiday season for holiday spice blends, and I will card that here and link it down below, where you can mix up your own apple pie spice, pumpkin pie spice, gingerbread spice, and poultry seasoning. But if you didn't want to go that far and make apple pie spice or buy it, you would use 1 teaspoon of cinnamon and 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. But that's in the recipe. You don't have to worry about trying to remember that. And here I have the star of this collab, 3 tablespoons of walnuts, 26 grams. I prefer to weigh my nuts out because that way I'm getting more accurate reading on how much is there. If I try to measure it in a measuring spoon, all those bumps and curves and everything, I'm not sure if that's accurate or not. So I prefer to weigh them. So it is 26 grams, just enough for a little sprinkling on the top to get a little nutty flavor, but not to overwhelm the bites, points, and calories. Okay, so that is everything. I'm going to shuffle a few things around, get my apples peeled and chopped up, and I will be back. While I still have my cutting board out, I just finished chopping up the apples. Even though we're not going to be using the walnuts for a while, I did want to show you how I chop them because I do a very fine chop on these, because I want to be able to disperse the walnut flavor throughout without having a lot of walnuts in there. Still want to give the flavor, but I don't want to add all those bites, points, and calories. So I'm going to chop this up really, really fine. You can use different nuts if you prefer. You can use pecans or whatever, but some nuts will have a little higher bite or point value. I'm just going to chop them up, gather them together, chop them again. As I said, I want this really fine. It's going to be a sprinkling on the top, but I want it to be able to go over the entire bread pudding, not just have chunks in there. I want it to be all over so every bite has some of this flavor. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. There are some larger chunks, some smaller chunks, and if you see any that are too large for you, you can cut those up, but that looks perfect to me. So I'm going to put these back in the bowl and then gather up my other ingredients. Okay, so first things first, we want to take our eggs and we're going to beat those until they are light and frothy, so that way they're going to increase in volume, and that's going to give us more volume to soak up into the bread. So I'm going to beat these for about 3 minutes just to get them to that stage, and I will show you what it looks like. Okay, so it has been about 3 minutes. You can see how light and foamy this has gotten. It's increased in volume. That is what we're looking for. Now we're going to add in the sugar replacement, the vanilla, and the apple pie spice, and we're going to beat this all together. Now you just need to beat this until it's combined. You can see it's all one homogeneous brown color now. And I added the sugar and the spice in here with the eggs because since the eggs are the main flavoring in this dish, I wanted to make sure that this was more incorporated with the eggs, and then I will add in the other ingredients. So we're going in with the 1.5 cups of almond milk and the 1/2 cup of fat-free 50/50, and just quickly mix that together. Okay, so that looks good. It's nice and foamy. The milk has been incorporated as well as the other ingredients. I'm going to add in the bread now, and what we're going to do is we're going to toss this around. We want it to soak up a lot of this custard, so we're going to just toss that around, press it in, so that all of the pieces are getting some of that liquid. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is let this sit here for 15 minutes, give that bread time to soak in that custard, and that's really gonna help us get a nice texture on our bread pudding. So I'm gonna let that sit here. I am going to toss it every now and again just to make sure any of these surface pieces are getting some of the liquid on them and it's not just staying at the top. But I will turn that, mix it through, 15 minutes, and I'll be back. Okay, it's been about 15 minutes and you can see that the bread has soaked up quite a bit of the custard, and it's also gotten softer, and that is what we wanted. It's still holding its shape. The reason I put the bread in first before adding the fruit is because I didn't want anything getting in the way of it soaking up all of that custard that it could. It soaked up what it can, so now what we're going to do is add in our apples and our cranberries, and just toss that through because you want this evenly dispersed, as evenly as you can get it, and that looks pretty good right there. So now I have my 8-inch baking pan that I have sprayed with the cooking spray. I also have some foil here because we're going to put this into the pan and then we are going to cover it with foil. And the reason we're going to cover it is we want to retain moisture in our bread pudding. We don't want it to dry out while it's in the oven because it will be in there for some time. It'll be in there for almost an hour total. So put that in and then just spread this out into the pan so that we have a nice even level here. And you want to press down a little bit to kind of compact everything in there. And that looks pretty good. So now we're going to take our walnuts and we're going to evenly distribute them over the top. Getting into the corners, you want every bit to have a little bit of walnut on there. Sorry, my throat and neck are giving me issues today, so my voice is a little wavery at times, so pardon me if that is coming across as sounding odd. For those of you who don't know, who are new to my channel, I have neuropathy and myopathy, which means my muscles and nerves don't always work correctly. And a lot of times my jaw and neck have issues, which is why, if anyone's ever wondered, I don't taste anything on camera because I have difficulty chewing. At least the first bite. Once my muscles get used to the idea that I'm supposed to be chewing, they're okay, but that first bite is always a problem. So there we have all of our walnuts on top. I'm just gonna tap those in just so they'll get set in with the bread pudding. I mean, I'm sure it'll be fine if I didn't do this, but why risk it? Now we're going to take the foil and cover our bread pudding. The reason we're doing this, as I said, is to retain moisture. A lot of times they will have what they call a bain-marie or a water bath in there. So what that would do is create steam in the oven to then let everything bake more gently and more evenly. It will also keep it from drying out, which is our main purpose here. We want to make sure there's a nice custardy texture to our bread pudding, so we don't want it drying out too quickly. So this is going into a 325-degree oven for 40 minutes. After 40 minutes, I'm going to remove the foil and let it bake another 15 to 20 minutes so that it can set more firmly and we won't need to worry about it drying out too much. So 40 minutes in, take off the foil, carefully take off the foil, and then leave it in for another 15 to 20 minutes. So in 1 hour, we will have some delicious apple cranberry bread pudding, and I will see you then. Okay, so there we have it, beautiful apple cranberry bread pudding. It smells so good. I can't wait to dig into this. But you do have to let it cool slightly. You don't have to let it cool completely. Some people do enjoy their bread pudding warm. I go back and forth where sometimes that warmth is nice. Generally, I think I like it cold, but it all depends on my mood. If you've been watching me for a while, you know my moods dictate everything. But there you have it, my apple cranberry bread pudding. This will be great on your Thanksgiving table, as I said, on any party table that's coming up. But you could change it up, as I said, and use blueberries in place. You can play around with the fruits. Just do what you like. Now, I wrote this up as serving 6. You could, if you wanted, have it cut up into more servings. You could do 8. Honestly, the bites and points don't change whether you're doing 6 or 8. So me, I always opt for the bigger dessert. But if you're following calories, you may want to do it as a serving of 8, although still the calories are not that bad. For 1/6 of this pan is only 3 Better Balance bites or Old Blue Points. I am on the Healthy Better Balance plan, which is the equivalent to the old WW Blue plan, which I guess WW has kind of retaken as their new program and called it Points, just Points. I don't know. I don't remember what it is, but apparently it is similar to the Blue plan, basically the same thing. So it seems like I am back on track with giving bites and points as Blue and Better Balance. Long-winded way of saying 3 Better Balance bites or Old Blue Points, whether you do 6 servings or 8 servings. Now, if you're following calories, the calories for 1 serving of this is 198, so not bad for a dessert. And if you're following macros, the fat would be 6.8 grams. The carbs would be 40.6 grams. The fiber would be 6.4 grams. And the protein would be 8.1 grams. And again, that's using the bread that I used and everything else. If you change something up, just make sure you're putting it into the recipe builder as you're doing it, and you'll be fine. So I hope that you are going to give this a try, and I'd like you to go down to the description box where you will find all the other channels linked who are doing this collab for Nut-Vember. There's going to be all sorts of nut-related recipes down there. Mine may just squeak under that nut heading, but there are nuts in here, Jay, so I don't want to hear about it. Just kidding. But go check out all of the other channels that are doing this collab, and thank you to Jay from The Average Jay for including me in this collaboration. I hope that if you are new here that you will consider subscribing, sticking around to see what else I have to offer. I have plenty of recipes on my channel that you might be interested in. And while you're at it, why don't you like, subscribe, comment, share, and hit that notification bell for the next time I upload any sort of video such as this one. This is coming out at a day that I don't normally release a video, but if you tap that notification bell, then you knew about it. Now the recipe for this deliciousness is going to be on my blog. I will link directly to the recipe down in the description box below. Also down there you'll find the link to my blog itself if you want to go and find any of my other recipes. Also down there is my Amazon storefront. If I've used anything that you might be interested in finding, it may be there. And my Built Bar rewards, my Fetch rewards, and my social media, both Instagram and 2 Facebook groups that I'm part of. So go check out the description box for all sorts of information. So I guess I'm going to let this cool down, as difficult as that will be. I still have dinner to have before I dig into dessert. So I guess it's probably better that I don't ruin my dinner, but what a way to ruin it. Anyway, until next time. Bye.